The Hyatt Hotel Group has announced that so-called hate groups will no longer be allowed to host conferences in Hyatt hotels, and the Huffington Post is ecstatic. HuffPost, it said, was the first to report on the Hyatt Regency's decision to host Act for America, which the Southern Poverty Law Center has designated a hate group. And now the Huffington Post's veteran pro-jihad smear merchant, Christopher Mathias, is spiking the football. Mathias is pleased that the Hyatt hotel chain has announced that it will no longer host groups that oppose jihad terror. Now, you might say, wait a minute, Spencer, at this point, Hyatt said they were going to stop hosting hate groups, not groups that oppose jihad terror. Indeed, but why has the Southern Poverty Law Center, the SPLC, designated Act for America, as well as Jihad Watch and other groups that oppose jihad terror, a hate group in the first place? Mathias sums it up with his usual vicious arrogance and tendentiousness. He says, although it bills itself as the NRA of national security, it mainly focuses on vilifying Muslims, spreading baseless conspiracy theories, and lobbying legislators to pass discriminatory laws. Mathias actually gives some examples of vilifying Muslims, which we'll examine. Spreading baseless conspiracy theories likely refers to the Muslim Brotherhood's explanatory memorandum, which lays out its plan for eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within. The Center for Security Policy and many others have shown conclusively that this is anything but a baseless conspiracy theory. Discriminatory laws refers to anti-Sharia laws, but since Sharia denies the equality of rights of women and non-Muslims, it would be more accurate to say that Act for America is opposing, rather than lobbying for, discriminatory laws. The fact is that ACT and Jihad Watch and the American Freedom Defense Initiative and the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the Center for Security Policy are all on the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate group list for opposing jihad terror and Sharia oppression. The proof of this is the fact that there is no significant group that opposes jihad terror that isn't on the SPLC's list. In other words, they don't identify some supposedly reasonable response to the jihad threat and then claim that ACT and AFDI and Jihad Watch and the rest have gone beyond reasonable bounds. Instead, they stigmatize and demonize anyone and everyone who dares mount the slightest and most tepid opposition to the global jihad as a hate group and is anti-Muslim, another smear. Was it anti-German to oppose the Nazis? And there are, meanwhile, no Islamic jihad groups on the SPLC's hate group list, no terror-tied Islamic charities, nothing. Mathias claims that Brigitte Gabriel, Act for America's founder, has repeatedly made bigoted comments about Muslims. She has stated incorrectly that practicing Muslims who believe in the teachings of the Quran cannot be loyal citizens of the United States of America. Incorrectly, the Imam Mathias assures us, but on what basis he does not say. The Quran says to beat a disobedient woman, that's chapter 4, verse 34, that a woman's testimony is worth half that of a man, that's chapter 2, verse 282, to be ruthless to unbelievers, that's chapter 48, verse 29, to behead unbelievers, that's chapter 47, verse 4, and to make war against the people of the book, that is, Jews and Christians and a few other groups, until they pay a special tax and submit to Islamic hegemony, that's chapter 9, verse 29. There's much more of this in the Quran, but even on the basis of those passages, there is a problem between the Quran and the Constitution. Mathias and his cohorts have never addressed this. Instead, they've waved it all away, defaming those who point it out as Islamophobic. Mathias also claims that Gabriel has said that Muslims are a natural threat to civilized people of the world, particularly Western society. I very seriously doubt that Gabriel said this of all Muslims. That is almost certainly Mathias's vicious misrepresentation. Meanwhile, would Mathias himself deny that jihadis are a threat to civilized people? He is so clueless and compromised that maybe he would. Ultimately, the SPLC and Mathias' characterization of Act for America, as well as others that the SPLC smears as hate groups, is a matter of opinion, not of objective fact. Should Hyatt Hotels or any other business really be denying service to any group based on the judgment of a private organization about that group? The SPLC is anything but an objective or unbiased source. Imagine how Mathias and the HuffPo would howl if the Hyatt chain started refusing to host groups based on the evaluation of, say, the American Freedom Defense Initiative, or the David Horowitz Freedom Center, or Act for America. The willingness of corporations to validate the SPLC and treat it as if it were a reliable arbiter of what constitutes a hate group and what doesn't is short-sighted and unwise, and sets a dangerous precedent. If your group or the favorite charity of Hyatt CEO Mark Hoplamazian ends up on the SPLC's list tomorrow, you'll see what I mean. As an Armenian, Hoplamazian should be ashamed of himself for caving to this pro-jihad intimidation and setting this dangerous precedent, which will lead ultimately to the denial of hotel accommodations to all those whose political opinions are deemed unacceptable. That's the kind of thing that happens in totalitarian states. And thanks to Mark Hoplamazian, Christopher Mathias, the Huffington Post, and above all, the Southern Poverty Law Center, we're well on the way there. I'm sure Hoplamazian and the Hyatt brass will be glad to hear that I will never stay at a Hyatt again as long as this totalitarian policy is in place, and will recommend to everyone I know that they should boycott the Hyatt chain. They don't want people who've been smeared by the SPLC around? That's very easy to arrange. I'm Robert Spencer, Shillman Fellow for the David Horowitz Freedom Center and Director of Jihad Watch. This video has been brought to you by the Center for Security Policy.